Parsing every structure in a massive aerial view presents a severe computational challenge. An algorithm must process highly granular textures across millions of raw pixels. Traditional convolutional neural networks manage this scale efficiently. By sliding localized filters across the image, they evaluate a constrained number of neighboring pixels to incrementally build up a spatial hierarchy. Standard vision transformers attempt a very different approach. They calculate global self-attention across the entire visual sequence. This operation forces every individual patch in the image to explicitly calculate its semantic relationship with every other patch simultaneously. This chart shows the mathematical consequence of that design. Notice the squared term in the big O notation. The computational complexity of global attention scales quadratically with respect to the total number of patches. Doubling the input resolution quadruples the memory cost, instantly exhausting GPU VRAM. Because of this quadratic explosion, pure isotropic transformers are mathematically restricted to low resolutions, rendering them incompatible with modern, dense computer vision tasks. The swin transformer addresses this bottleneck by integrating the local inductive biases of CNNs with the multi-head self-attention mechanism. To understand exactly how it accomplishes this, we have to look past the top-level architecture. And we must track the precise mathematical transformation of a single image tensor through the network's entire forward pass. This graphic precisely displays our starting point, a standard high-resolution input tensor. We have a batch size of 1, an initial depth of 3 standard RGB color channels, and spatial dimensions of 224 by 224 pixels. By tracking the dimensional geometry of this tensor across the architecture's 4 primary stages, we can see exactly how the swin network manipulates algorithmic complexity to achieve strict linear efficiency. This diagram demonstrates the initial patch partitioning module. The raw 224 by 224 spatial grid is sliced into highly granular, non-overlapping 4 by 4 pixel blocks, resulting in a dense 56 by 56 grid of localized patches. Because each block spans 4 pixels vertically, 4 pixels horizontally, and contains 3 physical color channels, the uncompressed raw feature dimension of a single patch token evaluates exactly to 48. The two-dimensional spatial topology then unwinds into a flattened sequence format. The topological shape transforms into one batch, a sequence length of 3,136 individual tokens, and a depth of 48. Following this extraction, a linear embedding layer acts as a convolutional projection. It maps those 48 raw pixel vectors into a continuous embedding dimension, which for the base model is defined as C equals 96. This readout displays the final tensor completing stage 1. The sequence remains 3,136 tokens long, but each token is expanded to a 96-dimensional floating point vector. Standard vision transformers explicitly inject static absolute positional embeddings at this phase. The swin architecture omits that operation, leaving the tensor scale invariant and primed for localized manipulation. Entering stage 2, this diagram illustrates the primary structural division. The model partitions the continuous 56 by 56 spatial grid into 64 isolated, non-overlapping macro windows, defined by a 7 by 7 patch boundary. By enforcing this boundary, the sequence length over which the network calculates self-attention is strictly limited to 49 individual tokens per window. This is the window-based multi-head self-attention module. The query, key, and value matrices are mapped and computed exclusively within these 49 token domains, running independently of adjacent spatial regions. This side-by-side comparison confirms the hardware impact. By replacing the sequence length variable with the static window size, the squared exponent is eliminated. The module's complexity drops from a quadratic curve to a strictly linear scaling with respect to image resolution. Because absolute positional anchors were omitted, the module evaluates space by synthesizing a relative position bias. It calculates a dynamic coordinate displacement parameter between any 2 tokens and injects it directly into the attention probability formula. While this windowed approach secures linear computational efficiency, it introduces a semantic flaw. Tokens are trapped inside their 7 by 7 silos, isolated from the global context. If those windows remain isolated, the model cannot interpret macroscopic visual structures that span across multiple boundaries. To bridge these topological domains, the subsequent layer utilizes shifted window self-attention. The algorithm displaces the entire partitioning grid downward and to the right by exactly half the window size. This animation illustrates the structural overlap. As the new boundaries intersect the previous layer's framework, tokens from previously isolated regions are forced to occupy the same computational window, enabling an exchange of features. However, translating a uniform grid across a fixed image plane produces an asymmetric geometric edge problem. It leaves irregular, undersized window fragments at the bottom and right margins, which would break the uniform tensor shapes required for GPU batch processing. This diagram outlines the algorithmic solution. The feature map undergoes a cyclic shift, computationally treating the flat grid as a continuous torus. The upper and left-hand margins detach and seamlessly append to the opposite boundaries, maintaining exactly 64 uniform windows. Wrapping the image stitches opposite extremes of the physical data together. To stop the attention operation from learning correlations between these semantically disjointed regions, a topological masking matrix is synthesized. Invalid token pairs are struck with a negative penalty of -100, which drives their attention probability to absolute zero. The cyclic shift maintains parallel GPU throughput, while the masking matrix preserves spatial fidelity, solving the cross-window communication bottleneck. To incrementally abstract local granular features into expansive global context, the continuous sequence requires spatial downsampling through a patch merging operation. This animation shows the spatial gathering phase. The algorithm extracts tokens from every 2x2 localized patch cluster across the entire spatial map using a step stride of 2. Following extraction, these 4 subgrids undergo a depth-wise concatenation. The separate 96-dimensional vectors are unified directly along the channel axis into a 384-dimensional block. To prevent exponential parameter explosion in deeper layers, a linear compression layer immediately scales the 384-dimensional representation down to 192 dimensions. Completing the merge operation yields a specific output tensor geometry. The spatial grid is halved from 56 by 56 to 28 by 28, while the continuous channel depth doubles to 192. This mechanism allows the network to increase its receptive field organically, mirroring the spatial hierarchies used by traditional CNNs. Executing the windowed attention module, the shifted windowed attention module, and the patch merge operation constitutes one complete macroscopic stage of the model. For the swin-T variant, the model repeats these blocks across 4 stages: 2 blocks in stage 1, 2 in stage 2, 6 blocks in stage 3, and 2 terminal blocks in stage 4. This cascading diagram highlights the flow into stage 3, the primary computational stage for deep contextual dependencies. Here, the spatial grid compresses to 14 by 14, while the channel depth expands to 384. Finally, the tensor tracks through stage 4, undergoing its final geometric downsampling. It resolves into a highly abstracted 7 by 7 spatial grid, with a channel depth maximized at 768. This transition from granular inputs to coarse, deeply semantic outputs mimics standard hierarchical feature pyramids, allowing the swin backbone to integrate with dense object detection architectures. Reaching the end of the architectural stages, the terminal feature map exhibits a topological shape of 49 spatial tokens, each possessing a 768-dimensional depth. To output a discrete categorical prediction, the topological map collapses its spatial domain entirely using a global adaptive average pooling operation. This diagram isolates the pooling mechanism. The operator aggregates values across the spatial grid, flattening the 49 segments into a singular 768-dimensional vector. This vector feeds into a dense projection layer, projecting precisely 1,000 class logits, matching the ImageNet framework. Every spatial role, patch partition, and localized self-attention equation executed across millions of parameters exists to align extracted features into this terminal one-dimensional space. This diagram provides the tensor shape blueprint for the swin-T architecture. It maps the linear dimensional flow from raw input down to the finalized probability distribution. This table confirms the efficiency of the design. Operating with roughly 28 million parameters and demanding 4.5 gigaflops of compute, it matches the footprint of ResNet models while resolving the memory constraints of earlier vision transformers. For researchers building the pipeline, this PyTorch pseudocode anchors the 2 core mechanics: the cyclic shift roll function and dimensional transpositions required for window partitioning. By confining self-attention locally and engineering a global hierarchy, the swin transformer established a backbone capable of navigating the highest complexity tasks in computer vision.